Said the old man, looking at all sides of the book as if it were some strange object. This is an important book, but it's really irritating.
I don't even own a television. The Alchemist.
1, 2, 3. There are books that are good, there are books that are bad. There's some books so fucking awful you wish you never had read them at all. 'Cause a novel can ruin your life. Hey buddy, I don't even own a television.
All right, welcome to I Don't Even Own a Television, a podcast about bad books. I am J.W. Friedman.
I'm Chris Collision.
And we are talking about the oft-requested book, The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And I hope I didn't murder that too much.
We're going to go with that. We mean no offense if we're getting it wrong, though.
Yeah, definitely not. There are plenty of things to talk about in this book without making fun of a man's name.
Yeah, I think we can pitch it a little bit higher than that.
Before we get going too far into this, I think this is probably a good time up front to mention something that I feel like maybe goes without saying, but sometimes doesn't. Sometimes we talk about books on this show that revolve around philosophy. And when we trash these books, we don't want you to feel like we're calling you stupid.
No.
So I just want to make sure that if anyone out there, you know, this is definitely a book that has a reach. And if this has affected you in a personal way, just know that this is in good fun. We definitely aren't trying to like shit all over your beliefs or something.
I think that's fair. I am, however, going to try to shit all over this book because I really, really did not like this book.
I think that's fair too. I may or may not just be saying this because this is a book that my wife likes.
I know you're not, and I know that we talked about this a little bit before off air. This is a book that can speak very loudly to people. Even though I think it's mostly saying bad things, I don't think that makes you a bad person if it spoke loudly to you and helped you be a better person. What I'm worried about with this book is that I think that the things it's saying might make you a worse person. That said, that's because when it says those things to me, I'm a terribly entitled, privileged, middle-aged, mid-sized white male, right? Yeah. So those things being said to someone who is not those things, that can be very, very helpful, and I don't mean to cast aspersions upon that at all.
Well, wait, Collision. What are these things of which you speak? Perhaps it's time to enlighten the audience with a plot in 60 seconds.
Let's do it, but I refuse unless there's a song first.
Nobody knows if you finish or not. You got 60 seconds to give them a plot. Plot in 60 seconds.
All right, now you got to do it.
Shit, now I do. I mean, now I get to.
All right.
Okay.
Go.
A boy is an Andalusian shepherd in love with a young village girl. He has a dream interpretation session with a gypsy who tells him to find a treasure at the pyramids. A wizard tells him not to give up on his dreams. The boy sells his sheep and goes to Tangiers, where he sadly does not meet William Burroughs. He does, however, get ripped off when he is distracted by a shiny sword that gets lavishly described and never appears or matters again. He meets a shopkeeper and helps him revolutionize the way crystal glasses are sold by opening an Apple store in a glass shop. He decides to go on a caravan to the pyramids. He meets a bookish Englishman who wants to be an alchemist and helpfully explains the central metaphor of alchemy / this book several times. The boy meets a new girl and falls in love with her. She tells him he should follow his heart and go away and come back only if he feels like it. He goes away. He meets a real alchemist who re-explains the metaphors a few more times. The boy gets to the pyramids and through no action of his own and nothing more than pure narrative convenience, discovers that his treasure was wop at home in Andalusia all along. So he goes to retrieve it, and it is literal treasure despite the central metaphor of alchemy.
Out of time.
Damn it. He also thinks that he should go find his desert love girlfriend now. The end.
Okay, that's very apt. These things all happen.
Yep.
But running through this book, I think more importantly than the narrative, is the tenet of kind of thinly veiled self-help theology. Yep. And it's a little ham-fisted, for sure. As you mentioned, the book revolves around a metaphor about alchemy, which is described to you no less than 5 times in almost the same exact words.
Yeah, time after time after time. Should we get into the message a little bit?
Let's do it.
Do you want to start there? Okay. So, in a lot of ways, I feel like this is sort of a bright second grader's idea of really good advice, right?
Yeah.
Like, the story is like, you're important no matter who you are. You already know everything you'll ever need to know. everything's going to be fine, everything is for the best, and you should always have a goal and not explicitly not have a plan, right? That's kind of the central message of the book, and it's weird because every one of those 4 or 5 things is wildly at odds with how I sort of have encountered my own life.
Yeah. And I mean, I think a thing that's really worth noting in this book, right, is that the central tenet of it is definitely follow your dreams. But it's presented in a way where every character in this book essentially is telling our protagonist that that's more important than anything else you can possibly do.
Yep.
To the point where it's explicitly, you know, like he abandons familial ties, he abandons his true love, things like this, you know, and it gets a little uncomfortable. And to kind of speak to what you were talking about earlier in the show, it becomes really interesting when you think about who it's talking to, because I think different people can come away from this with very different things.
And we talked about this a little bit as well earlier. It can be very helpful to tell certain people, be more selfish. It's not clear to me that very many Americans need to be told this, though. And I feel like I've done a few, you know, good and interesting things in my life, right? Like I've made some stuff. I've been on a podcast, for example.
Yeah.
You know, I've been in love. I've done all these things. And all of those seemed to me to be best when they were really, really joint endeavors, when they were really collaborative and they were really people coming together. And this book is explicitly anti that. Like all the women in this book are like, very clear, you should go do whatever you want to do, the boy. If I could never really be happy if you had not pursued your dreams. Yay, I'm just a prop in your story.
Yeah. No, there's a part where, you know, he meets the real alchemist who tells him what will happen if he abandons his dreams to live with this woman that he's fallen in love with. And without, you know, belaboring it, because this happens over several pages, he's basically like, you're going to end up falling out of love because you're going to resent her.
Yeah. Like, yeah, there's that. There's this part at the kind of early in the book where there's literally this sentence, another person was there to help him toward his personal legend. And I just thought that was so gross.
Well, let's hop back on the funny train right now anyway, because we're being real serious. I want to talk about personal legend, because that's definitely part of the recurring theme of this book.
Yep, capital P, capital L.
It is capitalized. I'm surprised there's not a trademark sign after it every time it comes up. And I Googled just because I wanted to make sure that there weren't like some kind of seminars going on at the same time. Like maybe you could buy tickets to the Hilton to go listen to Paulo talk about your personal legend.
Right.
I did want to mention that not only did Paulo write this book, he also wrote a teaching guide for this book. And I'm intensely suspect of anyone who writes a teaching guide for their own piece of fiction.
I was hoping not to get into this, but I can't not now. This book, one of the things I liked about it is it was fairly short, and there was both a lengthy foreword and a lengthy afterword, which made it even shorter. And in the foreword, he says things like, I reread this book a few times a year. Let me tell you how it makes me feel every time I do. Happy. You know?
Have you ever known...
I've never heard a writer say, oh yeah, I reread my own stuff all the time. It's great.
Have you ever known a guy in a band that every time you go anywhere in his car, he wants to listen to his own band, and he'll like tell you to be quiet so you can listen to a cool part coming up or whatever?
Pretty sure Axl Rose does that.
Yeah, well, that's this book and kind of the nature of the forward and the afterword give you that impression of this gent as a writer, which, I mean, once again, I mean, we're kind of getting back to, like, this is very obviously a self-help book disguised as a novel, in a way where it's, I guess, maybe a philosophical tome, quote unquote, but in a really light way. I think if you haven't read it, another book I'd compare it to is something like Life of Pi or Ishmael, if you've read these, where they're, I think, attempts to be modern-day parables, but they feel so self-important that it's really hard to take it seriously.
Yeah, and self-important and just not entertaining. It doesn't work on a book level because it's so repetitive and yet so thin. For a book that's only a couple hundred pages long, the same thing happens over and over again. You already mentioned the same thing happens in the same words again and again. And this is not a book that shows and doesn't tell. This is a book where every couple of pages, somebody sits you down and tells you the thing again. My favorite version of that, let me see if I can find it. There's a moment sort of toward the end where the boy asks the alchemist, "Is listening to my heart the last lesson I needed to learn?" "No, the last lesson you need to learn is blah, 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 blah lesson you haven't learned yet." And it's like, that's not how an entertaining book works.
It's true. He basically throughout the book moves through a series of kind of short vignettes with different characters that he meets who enlighten him in various ways, but they all kind of exist to repeat the central tenet of the book in slightly different words. And I mean slightly.
Yeah.
We're definitely not talking here about, you're seeing the same thing through the eyes of these different personalities. And all it's like suddenly God author is talking through the mouths of these characters and just repeating the same thing in the same fucking words.
And it's not a cumulative lesson or anything. It's not like, story 1, you learn to listen to your heart. Story 2, you learn to listen to your heart and sometimes realize that your heart is misleading you. And in step 3, you learn to listen to your heart and know when it is and is not misleading you. No, step 1, you learn to listen to your heart. Step 2, you learn to listen to your heart. Step 3, you learn to listen to your heart. And then it goes on to a total of 5 steps or whatever. It's awful. Maybe we should jump into high points, low points.
That's probably a good idea. Okay. I'll start here with a high point. I'm a sucker for a journey in books, as I think listeners will know. And I did kind of like the progression of the character towards his final goal of getting to the pyramids in Egypt. After that, this really corny fucking God from the machine moment happens where he realizes everything he needed is back at home or whatever. But up until then, there is kind of this, it's like he's overcoming a series of obstacles to get to the end of his quest. And I dig that structure in books, so I enjoyed this.
All right. I should note, he doesn't realize that a guy who's mugging him tells him that. And it turns out to be true. But
that's very true. Yeah.
It's really weird and awkward. So my high point was, it was kind of short. It was pretty easy to get through. There were no terrifying obstacles like we find in some books where, either the prose is impenetrable or the characters are just that unpleasant to spend time with. Thinking of our last couple in a row like that. Because there really aren't any characters. They're just sort of props in this little parable.
Yeah, that's true. And our hero does seem very personable. Like, he seems like a nice gentleman.
Yeah.
So, I'll agree with that.
Yeah.
I guess getting to a low point here, this book is self-referential in a way that, like, is really irritating. I mean, you'll notice the cold open that we started the show with, I think, was a great example of that. But, here's another moment. So this is the real alchemist describing how alchemy works. And he says, "I learned the science from my grandfather who learned from his father and so on, back to the creation of the world. In those times, the master work could be written simply on an emerald. But men began to reject simple things and to write tracts, interpolations, and philosophical studies. They also began to feel that they knew a better way that others had. Yet the emerald tablet is still alive today." And so my first inclination on reading that was to write an angry note. And I said, that's exactly what this smug little book is, because it is. And then my second inclination was to realize that that's exactly how I'm supposed to feel. And that made me really angry.
Yeah.
I got worked by a book.
There's another great example of that where I think it's right before the cold open you read, where he says he started to read the book he had bought. On the very first page, it described a burial ceremony, and the names of the people involved were very difficult to pronounce. If he ever wrote a book, he thought, he would present one person at a time so that the reader wouldn't have to worry about memorizing a lot of names. Okay, so there's that. That's annoying as shit. Also, the next character he meets is this Wizard King guy whose name is so complicated, I just called him Melt Banana because I couldn't figure out what his fucking name was.
I think it's biblical. I could be wrong. I don't have it in front of me, so I'm not even going to attempt to remember it. It starts with an M and it has an L and a Z in it.
Exactly. He's the king of Salem, if that helps our more biblically inclined listeners dig it. But yeah, I just called him Melt Banana.
Yeah, he has a name that seems very Old Testament-y. So that was the impression I got. But yeah, so that happens. That was my low point.
And I think kind of similar to that, this is essentially a self-help book, but it's a self-help book dressed up as a story, and the advice is pretty bad and shallow, and the story didn't work for me. And I think the main problem is at least self-help books start with the premise that there's a problem, something you want help with.
Yeah.
And this book starts with the premise that you're already super good and you should just be yourself. So it's less a self-help book than a Valentine to yourself.
It's I could see it being written from the perspective of self-empowerment, I guess, in a way. Which, once again, is kind of hard to argue with as a philosophy, but it's so corny and it's so ham-fisted. It's just really hard to get past the fact that you repeatedly have characters literally telling each other, follow your dream. It's the most important thing in the world to make your heart happy.
And sacrifice everybody in your life if they do not want to help you make your heart happy.
There was, a while ago on the internet, there was a comic strip going around from Zen Pencils, I believe, that was basically a tribute to Calvin and Hobbes, I guess, that was drawn in the style of Calvin and Hobbes, but it was basically like, had the same sort of message, was throw everything in your life away, do what you want to do. And I just remember seeing people getting really angry about it because it was, I mean, and justifiably so, that's a really, really kind of facile sort of empowerment message. There are better ways to say this, is what I'm trying to say.
And just from an execution standpoint, if you think that you are going to be able to draw in the style of Bill Watterson, I would like to gently suggest to you that that's unlikely to be true.
Yeah. No, it looked good. It looked good enough,
Right.
but the problem was it was a message that would have never been in a Calvin and Hobbes comic.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry.
Comic strip digression.
If you want to listen to two assholes talk about the best way to send a message of self-empowerment in your media, tune into the show where we make fun of things every 2 weeks. High point. I had another high point.
Yeah. Do it.
They talk about an oasis, and they talk about how it's actually, this really large section of the desert, and it's not this tiny little area with palm trees and stuff, and that there, there are rules in the warring tribes that you don't invade an oasis and all this stuff. So I was like, I'm going to look this up. And goddamn it, that was kind of true.
Oh.
At least in the sense of, that's what they say in a lot of these historical tomes and stuff. Who knows whether it was really true or not. But I learned a thing from this book, and I enjoyed that. So
Nice. So my high point is that it's hard to put. The book is so badly structured and so repetitive that I started to try to think of comparisons after a while, and I realized at some point that this book is less narratively sophisticated than like your average episode of Pokemon. So, one of the high points of reading this book for me was thinking for a couple of minutes about watching an episode of Pokemon and how much I used to enjoy watching the occasional episode of Pokemon.
what if Pokemon was all about Ash and his search for enlightenment?
I mean, isn't it?
I guess in a way it kind of is.
Isn't it?
Because friendship is where the true power lies.
That's number one, true. Number two, you're evolving your Pokemon. It's just
like alchemy.
It's just like alchemy. You're not purifying the metal. That's a
true.
metaphor for purifying yourself.
So the master source is some kind of Mewtwo.
I'm just saying that you have to unleash your inner, Charizard or whatever.
You have to be the best that ever was that no one can deny. We're going to take a break and
talk about Team Rocket for a while.
probably high five a couple times with a cool freeze frame the minute our hands touch. So we'll be right back.
Yeah, yo, when the time is worse, never leave my fam in the jam. I'm dying first, never till my last dollar. I'm grinding first, never take the stand on my fam. I'm silent first, it's going down. You feel me? The alchemist in the flesh, and I love this profession, but I throw it all away in a second, cause I'm for the cause when my life is threatened. Take this and that, maybe that'll take that. Man, you know how he cooks the pot up. You could get caught up in some things you would not want us, so slow and watch how I mold the sound. So when I ain't around, the music still.
Boy, howdy. Welcome back to I Don't Even Own a Television.
That was a really good episode of Pokemon we just watched.
Yeah. Man, I love the part where Ash and Pikachu overcame adversity.
Oh, it was so great. They
made
just
me
believe in each other so much.
I was saying, it's funny, both of us are far too old to be this familiar with the plots of the Pokemon cartoon show, as neither of us were children when that came out. I was in community college and smoked a lot of pot, though, so...
I was 2 years out of college before I knew that Pokemon existed.
I just remember getting real emotional about Pokemon, on my shitty inflatable furniture. I think I had a Godfather 2 poster, as a matter of fact. Oh boy. Okay, so we're talking about, I almost said The Prophet. We're talking about The Alchemist. Kind of falls into that same category, I think. While we were off the air just now, Collision showed me a Twitter account called Positive Sailor Moon that's filled with some self-help advice from the perspective of a happy anime character. And I am proud to say I think it's better than this book.
Agreed. So agreed. I found it while procrastinating on reading this book, and would definitely advise you if you're feeling that you're at a place in your life where you could use some positivity and some support. Posi Sailor Moon is definitely where it's at. The Alchemist is not where it's at.
Yeah, save the $6. Follow a gimmick Twitter.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this book, we're here on this show to answer the big questions. I think there's a pressing issue that needs to be addressed.
There's a really big question that I had while reading this book, Jay. Is this a Weed Dad book?
Is this a Weed Dad book?
Is it?
Yes and no. The short answer is yes. But this is a Weed Everyone book. Because I feel like you're far more likely to get this book recommended to you by your weird aunt who's into crystals and smokes weed sometimes, like with her friends, like for spiritual reasons, than you are maybe a weed dad that's going to recommend something a little more manly, like Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Mechanics.
I was just going to say, yeah, something that has a motorcycle in it, for example.
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of weed dads have probably read this book, probably because they've had it recommended to them by weed aunts. Okay. But I think ultimately this book falls into the realm of weed aunt, weed uncle as well, like... In the 80s, when I was young, I had a friend whose uncle lived with him, and he was like a holdover from the hippie era. Uncle Ed, hippie areas.
Here in San Francisco, we're pretty close to a hippie area known as Haight-Ashbury.
But Uncle Ed was notorious amongst me and my friend for cooking quiche all the time. Uncle Ed would recommend this book to you.
Nice.
So, not so... Yeah, weed dad, sure, but I'd say more kind of the weird extended family.
Okay. Weed cousin, maybe?
Weed cousin.
Yeah,
or maybe if you had one of those pot dealers that was real spiritual.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would want to lecture you instead of making you watch them play Xbox.
Right. I would read the following to help bolster your point. I think it's dead on, and I stumbled over this while you were saying that. The boy was beginning to understand that intuition is really a sudden immersion of the soul into the universal current of life, where the histories of all people are connected, and we are able to know everything because it's all written there. Yeah, this is a weed book.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
That's fairly clear.
I mean, Homeboy wrote a teaching guide to his own book, and you know that was fueled by some fucking reefers. But what I actually meant when I said this was 20 pages later. Yeah.
Supposedly, from the foreword, he was kind of on a quest to find himself, and he did go on a super long pilgrimage where he walked around Spain. Which sounds awesome.
Sounds more interesting than what we read.
Yeah, I would rather have read just the story about that without the Alchemist overlay. So that was a pretty important, I think, question to ask and answer. I think we probably have a couple of other questions about this book, though. I think one of my questions would be, what level of wisdom do you think most of the advice here is operating on? I can't call it fortune cookie wisdom because that might be slightly offensive, even though fortune cookies are, purely American invention.
Yeah.
I saw somebody the other day on Twitter refer to something as coffee mug wisdom, which sounds about right, but I can't rip off some random Twitter genius because I forgot to, favorite the tweet so I could find it later. I think I might call this t-shirt level wisdom.
Bumper sticker, perhaps.
Bumper sticker, that's good.
You want to give it a little more credit? Etsy needlepoint.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah.
Like a lot of these kind of slogans, for lack of a better term, because the book is filled with them, would be right at home, on something, needlepoint with a little image of one of those Tumblr type drawings of a child. I don't know.
Next to a unicorn or a pegacorn or something.
Exactly. The shit that kind of looks half anime and half Precious Moments.
Yeah.
The folks at home know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, you're talking about a line drawing without any kind of shading, without any kind of thing. Maybe a few MS Paint colors over the top.
Heads way too big, eyes way too far apart.
Possibly naked, but completely non-sexualized.
Tiny mouth, no nose.
Yeah. Man, we spend too much time on Tumblr. But I was sort of... so if we're going to say, and I think it's fair, that this is like needlepoint level advice or T-shirt level advice, where would we rather get advice from this book or from like, a T-shirt that says support your right to arm bears, or a T-shirt that says, sorry, I can only please one person a day. Today's not your day, and tomorrow's not looking good either.
Some of the most important things in my life that I've learned have come from T-shirts.
Yeah.
Like, if you're not the big dog, stay out of the yard.
Yep. That would be Big Johnson, I believe.
That's true. It's more fun to play pool when you're co-ed and naked.
Co-ed naked blank. Rough, tough, and in the buff.
There you go.
Always a big fan of that. There's Dr. Zog's Sex Wax. Not actually advice, but a good way to get a T-shirt with the word sex on it. Okay to wear at your high school.
I have one of those.
Yep.
Yeah. I think I feel like I get a lot more from a shirt like that. Although now I want to like bring my copy of The Alchemist down to the pier and get maybe like an airbrush Bart Simpson with some philosophical phrases.
Don't have a cow on your way to your personal legend, man.
Exactly. Personal legends, and then just like a cartoon drawing of me riding a go-kart with
Yeah.
blings all over it.
I will say that the smartest T-shirt I saw this week was definitely while I was flipping channels and chanced upon a little bit of what I like to call WWE SmackDown, which is a show that still exists apparently.
Yeah.
And they cut to a guy in the audience who looked about like you'd expect a guy in the audience of WWE
I know
SmackDown
exactly what you're about to talk about, and it makes me so happy.
And his T-shirt read, "Life is a
the
work."
Yeah. And he was really slumpy and just kind of, he had this really sad expression on his face.
Yep.
Everyone else was sitting down and he was standing up. I knew exactly what you were talking about. Oh, man. Life is a work, buddy.
Yep, it's that's a shoot, brother.
Oh, man. Oh, too much. Okay. So, sorry, I've got to compose myself now.
These are important moments, though. So we got to walk through this stuff. Like,
I think I have a question about this book, and that is, how do you classify this kind of story? I guess because it's not a novel. Mm-hmm. It's not really a parable. I don't know like what it's trying to be exactly. It's this really slim book, and it's a really thinly veiled metaphor.
Yep.
But it so explicitly explains the metaphor that you can't really call it a parable or a fable. It's weird.
I agree, and I think that that's its greatest weakness. I think that that's probably the author's attempt to make that its greatest strength, right? To make it kind of this hybrid work. It's not quite a novel. Parentheses, so please don't judge it like you would judge a normal novel. It's not really a self-help book, parentheses, so please don't judge it like you would judge a self-help book. It's not really a work of philosophy. It's not really a work of religious studies, even though we haven't even touched on this, but there's a lot of godding and religion in the book as well.
That's very true.
And I think it's, like I say, I think the only way to really frame it is to say that this is a fictionalized version of that kind of self-help philosophical treatise.
Yeah, there's a ton of God language. We haven't really talked about that. But in a very kind of like making reference to the Bible, not explicitly like mentioning it. You know, it's almost like there's wink and nudge references to biblical tales.
Oh, but there's explicit calls to the Quran. There's a lot of very...
That's true.
You know, he spends which makes sense. The character spends most of his time in Muslim country.
Yeah.
Right? Like one of the first things he notices when he gets to Tangiers is people bowing. Maybe 3 or 4 characters tell him, the Quran instructs us that we have to do 5 things. And the reason this keeps coming up is because one of those things is a pilgrimage. He's on a pilgrimage.
Yeah.
Right. So it makes sense that it kind of incorporates a lot of Islamic thought on that level, both, setting and one of the core tenets of Muslim faith. are all over this.
Well, this is interesting, and I'm about to get heady here, and we'll cut this off immediately afterwards. But like, I've become a lot more interested in kind of Judaism over the past few years, and you know, as I got more in touch with that side of my heritage, because I'm half and half and stuff, and it's something that I've been reading a lot more, and so a lot of this to me like struck me as particularly Old Testament related, which is interesting because in a way it's a shared mythos to a certain point. And so, yeah, I don't know. Just an interesting thing, I think, is that a lot of the stuff that I was thinking of as very explicitly biblical and Old Testament-y might be the same kind of stuff that struck you as, like, explicitly, like, Islamic. And I don't know. I guess that means that this book may be a little more interesting and complicated than I want to give it credit for. Or I'm just thinking about it too hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would miss most of the Old Testament references.
But
I do think we're talking about two different things, because when I say there's Muslim thought here, I mean that the guy says the Quran tells me to do 5 things, right?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. See, I was thinking more in just kind of vagaries, like a journey across the desert, you know, and like, you know, basically like there's a scene where he essentially meets a man on a horse who fucking arrives to like tell the future, you know what I mean? And that is a very Old Testament story.
You're right. He's compared to Joseph a couple times, I think explicitly, right?
Yeah, and Abraham. And so I think that's more what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
But
so both of those things are definitely there. Those are both currents. He's got, we didn't talk about this, but he's got these fortune-telling stones that he only uses once.
Thurim, and I don't remember the other name of it, but that's Old Testament as well. So
yeah, and it says it's Old Testament, which I definitely did not know. I didn't know if the book was lying to me there. So that, there is a lot of, I don't know, being steeped in those traditions that's here. So you can't fault the guy for not doing some research. You can maybe fault what he did with it.
Yeah, well, maybe it's time to fault him for some silly bullshit, because I want to talk about the character of Fatima, which I found just insufferably poorly written, and just kind of in a way where it's like, really, dude? This is what you're going to do with this?
You mean that richly defined and developed character with a mind of her own and a whole lot going on, who did not immediately simper around and subordinate herself to the boy?
I think that's a different book.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Oh crap. I'm thinking about The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Actually, I'm not thinking about The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
The Fatima I'm talking about is when he first arrives at the Oasis, he's told not to talk to any women who wear black because that means they're married. This Fatima is literally the first woman he meets who is not wearing black.
Yeah.
He immediately falls in love with her.
Yeah.
Proposes marriage. Then proceeds to creepily wait around every day at the well that she comes to so he can kind of wear her down.
Well, I mean, where else is he supposed to meet a woman in an oasis?
At some point, they become husband and wife, I guess, although that never explicitly is described. But what this means in the context of the story now is that Fatima is now obligated to allow him to go and pursue his dream and leave her for as long as he sees fit, with no warning and no sort of remorse, because she is, quote unquote, a woman of the desert.
That doesn't sound right, Jay. I think you're just making this up. Surely there's no part in the book where she says something like, as a woman of the desert, I'm used to being left by men and I'm totally okay with it.
No, that happens.
Really?
Yeah. And so she's basically like, it's all right. My destiny is to be abandoned and to pine for you. And I'll be happy no matter what happens, because that's what life is all about for me. But you, man, are destined for greater things. So go and pursue your dreams. And that is just, I don't know. Like, okay, if this were written in, ancient times, which it desperately wants you to think it was, like the prose and everything is written in this very, I would say, the style of like an Aesop fable or something. That would still be pretty detestable. But this book was written in what, like the 60s or the 70s?
My friend, this book was written in 1980 and 8.
Yeah, people knew way better by then. And that just like really struck me as, in a book that the rest of it, while you may or may not like it, is relentlessly positive. That particular chapter of the story really felt like a step in the wrong direction.
Absolutely. Let me see if I can find this, because... The desert takes our men from us, and they don't always return, she said. We know that, and we are used to it. Those who don't return become a part of the clouds, a part of the animals that hide in the ravines and of the water that comes from the earth. They become a part of everything. They become the soul of the world. Some do come back, and then the other women are happy because they believe that their men may one day return as well. I used to look at those women and envy them their happiness. Now I, too, will be one of the women who wait. I'm a desert woman, and I'm proud of that. I want my husband to wander as free as the wind that shapes the dunes. And if I have to, I will accept the fact that he has become a part of the clouds and the animals and the water of the desert. Which might be why, literally, when the book ends, this former shepherd is wandering around his former hometown with a stack full of gold, thinking, oh yeah, I should grab a boat back to the middle of the desert to pick up Fatima.
It's like literally like a cartoon light bulb like pops over his head on the last page of the book, and he's like, oh shit, Fatima. It's like one of those like dream moments where you realize like you forgot something important before the big meeting. Like It's insulting.
It's terrible.
And okay, so before we take a break, I want to say, like, I was reading this book, that part aside, really giving it the benefit of the doubt, you know, like really being like, this has a positive message in some ways for some people, you know. Like you said, there are definitely lots of people in this world who don't need to hear that it's okay to be selfish sometimes.
Right.
But there are people who do need to hear that sometimes, and, you know, I'm glad that this exists for them.
Right.
But I got to the end of the book, and the last page of mine is a preview of Paulo Coelho's Warrior of Light, and it's introduced thusly, and this really ticked me off. An inspirational companion to The Alchemist that invites us to live out our dreams, to embrace the uncertainty of life, and to rise to meet our own unique destiny. In his inimitable style, Paulo Coelho presents a collection of philosophical stories that will delight and guide seekers everywhere and help bring out the warrior of light within each of us. And like I said earlier, that's like something that is a pitch for a seminar. You'd go to a hotel like to go and see, and they'd have a free buffet, and then they try to sell you the book.
Unlocking the warrior of light within.
This book has far more in common with Wild Animus than it wants to admit.
You have already anticipated the pitch of my show notes, I see. Also in common with Wild Animus, and we'll save this for later, perhaps. Holy shit, does this guy talk about sheep a lot? Man, I know
he
you're
likes sheep.
Like, other shepherds would meet this guy and be like, whoa, bro, tone it down with the sheep already.
He refers to them as his friends far too often for me to think of him as a man who's completely in control of his mental faculties.
Here's a great sentence. Now he was here not with his flock, but with a shovel. I don't even know what that means. It's not relevant that he doesn't have sheep right now.
Well, you know, sheep and flock, that's a metaphor.
Oh, is he Jesus now?
I guess so. I don't know.
But he literally gives up his sheep over and over again.
That's true. Maybe it's just a metaphor for his worldly possessions.
So I just want to read this and then we'll take a break. It's very short. There must be a language that doesn't depend on words, the boy thought. I've already had that experience with my sheep, and now it's happening with people.
Oh, gosh. That's very strange. Let's go to break.
The world today, are we looking for a better way? People of the world unite. Let's make a difference, we can get it right. Let's make a difference, we can get it right. We are a positive hardcore band. We are ready to take a stand. We know the future's in all our hands. We are a positive hardcore band.
Welcome back to I Don't Even Own a Television. It's a podcast about bad philosophy.
And keeping a positive mental attitude.
That's true. Off mic earlier, we both kind of realized that this book is the literary equivalent of a positive hardcore band.
Short, repetitive.
Yeah. There's breakdown in the middle.
Yeah. You feel like you get the point way before they feel like they're done making the point.
Exactly. So what I was going to say is that anyone out there who's been listening to this that's like, this sounds like a good book. I need this message in my life. What you should instead do is just listen to one song by Gorilla Biscuits called Start Today.
Okay.
Because that's the same message from this book, except they just shout it at you a bunch of times. And it only takes a minute and a half.
A minute and a half, you say?
Yeah.
And I bet you can get that for less than the $11 I paid for my copy.
Really?
Yeah.
Man, son, you got owned. Mine wasn't that expensive.
Paulo, I hope you enjoy it, brother.
Yeah. I'm sure he's like rolling in his philosophical dough right now, either way, so we're cool. Yeah, so we're back here. This is the almighty third segment. This is the time when we do some games.
Yeah.
So I know you have something ready to go. What might it be?
This is a little thing I like to call Most Famous Fan.
The rich and the famous, but they read books too. They're rich and the famous, but they're only a little better than you.
Man, we barely ever get to hear that song.
It's true. It's a true blast from the recent past. It's
Ooh.
a moldy but goodie.
This was sprung on me just now, but my mind is already filling with possibilities. But why don't you go first so I can...
So there's two ways to go here, and there's one that's an obvious one, which is that in the foreword, the author casually name drops that 4 people were seen reading his book as it rocketed to the top of the charts, which he modestly reminds you this book was on the top of the charts, the New York Times bestseller list for 300 weeks.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
But who are these famous people reading the book?
Well, those famous people, Jay, are Bill Clinton, Madonna, Rush Limbaugh, and Will Smith. Who are definitely 4 people I would take advice from. I don't know about you.
What if Madonna and Will Smith made a song about this together? It would have been so great.
I would listen, but only if Rush Limbaugh and Bill Clinton either guested or at least were sampled.
Yeah.
However, I want to go a slightly different direction because I kept thinking as I read this book that there was something very familiar about the advice I was hearing and something very resonant, something in a trilogy I had grown up on and watched before this book was written. So, Jay, which of the following bad advice givers from Star Wars do you think is most likely to be represented in this book? Is it Obi-Wan Kenobi, who tells you just use the Force, turn off your targeting computer? Is it Yoda, who encourages you to be in the moment and know where you are and what you are doing?
Oh, dear.
Or is it the Emperor, who tells you to give in and feel your anger?
Ooh, okay. I'm going to answer this question, but then I'm also going to go off script here.
Great.
For me, it's definitely Obi-Wan, because this book kind of advocates a sort of reckless pursuit of whatever the fuck is important to you at the given moment and fuck everything else.
Before you go off script, I want to tell you that is in fact the correct answer.
Oh, good.
And I want to remind you of the following scene. The boy and the alchemist are rolling through town. "You can't go any farther," one of the bandits said. "You are in the area where the tribes are at war." "I'm not going very far," the alchemist answered, looking straight into the eyes of the horsemen. They were silent for a moment and then agreed that the boy and the alchemist could move along.
Oh, Jesus Christ, this was written after Star Wars too, wasn't it?
They weren't the droids they were looking for.
Oh, and it was written afterwards, oh, and they were in the desert.
And they were in the desert.
Oh, I feel a house of rhetoric collapsing on top of my head. It's a TFW. You realize that your philosophical tome is echoing the plot of Star Wars.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so before you introduce this wrinkle, I was just thinking about who the most famous person I could think of that led this book was.
Oh, yeah.
And almost instantly who I thought of was Jared Leto. Because he posted all these pictures on Twitter for a while that were just him in like pensive poses with quotes from famous people talking about following your dreams.
Right.
He's recommended this book to someone before.
Right.
So anyway,
I feel that.
That's what I was thinking.
I just want to say that that got a lot, like one of him sitting in like a deck chair with a super pretentious look on his face.
He's eating an orange.
Got retweeted a lot. And I know this for a fact was based on a screen cap that I took because I was afraid he was going to delete it. And the reason I know that the screen cap was mine is because if you look closely, you can see that it was a BlackBerry 10 Twitter client, which like 4 people on the planet were using at the time. Anywho, my claim to fame.
I'm sure the people at home will be thrilled to know that. By the way, greetings, new listeners from Podmas.
Yeah, exactly.
We're internet famous.
I'm a really big deal on Twitter.
People have retweeted our Jared Leto pictures. And The other day I posted some math joke that got like 34 retweets.
Yeah. I don't know. You could probably find at least Jay on that weird Twitter map that's going around.
Oh, let's not talk about this. All right. Anyway.
Fair enough. Yeah, so that was my game. I think another important thing about reading a book like this, when you're reading it in an electronic way, is that there's this convenient feature that highlights the book for you and tells you what everybody else thinks is important, which is great when you live in a country full of such smart readers and right-on thinkers as we do.
Yeah. And normally when you're reading a book like this, the popular highlights say 32, 34 popular highlights. You can tell, like, the level of, and to kind of turn an internet phrase here, the level of glurge that you're reading as far as just, like grossly sentimental stuff that's essentially meaningless but appeals to people in the way those you might be an introvert if quizzes do.
Right.
By the number of people that are represented in the popular highlights of an ebook. In this case, you have things like this that literally has 740 highlights.
Wow.
It was the language of enthusiasm, of things accomplished with love and purpose, and as part of a search for something believed in and desired.
Well, I'm just going to needlepoint that on my neck.
Yeah, I mean, that's like a bad text tattoo on somebody's side that you see on the internet, and you're like, oh, that's regrettable. And 740 fucking people.
Yeah, thought that was like the most relevant thing. There's one that I had. I don't know if this is actually a popular highlight, but this is a sentence that literally forgets what it's about halfway through. Here he was, at the point of finding his treasure. He reminded himself, no project is completed until its objective has been achieved. Like, what?
Yeah, I mean...
Like, what's the important part? I would think that the important part of this is him finding his treasure, and then it's about project management all of a sudden?
Oh... Here's one more popular highlight. I have no idea why this was popular either. But once again, I think it kind of tells you a little bit about how the story is told. It says, he had already imagined the scene many times. Every time, the girl became fascinated when he explained that the sheep had to be sheared from back to front.
Oh!
Nothing gets a girl more than explaining how simple tasks work. This is a eerie echo of Casino Royale, actually. Like, at this point in the book, I thought our hero was going to start explaining how Baccarat works.
Oh, my God. That's an eerie echo of masculinity itself. Like, surely this woman I've barely talked to will be interested if I condescend to her about the thing I know about.
And that's his fantasy. Like,
yeah.
Oh, man. Just lie awake at night waiting for the moment where I can explain something I understand to a woman.
Yeah, I think we could make a huge amount of money coming up with a form of non-sexual porn that's just that. Like, you know, the POV video is some woman that you find attractive walks up to you and says, can you explain blank to me?
There's like a whole video that's just a woman listening attentively while someone explains how, like a manual transmission works.
Yeah.
That's horrible, but yeah, you could make so much money. There's a huge dad niche for this, and I think we need to fuck this podcast shit, man. Okay. Couple more popular highlights here. Let me find one. 241 readers thought this was important. He wept because God was unfair and because this was the way that God repaid those who believed in their dreams. Jesus Christ, people.
Yeah. Jeez. Oh, my God. Okay, so let me read a couple that may not be that popular, but that certainly jumped out at me. This one, I think, says a huge amount about the book. When you possess great treasures within you and try to tell others of them, seldom are you believed. Yeah, right, because you're special, and the more special you think you are, that probably explains why other people don't think you're special.
Vincent, the world was not made for one as beautiful as you.
Gah! And then one that was just, like, bizarre to me. I really enjoyed this. Does a man's heart always help him, the boy asked the alchemist. Mostly. Just the hearts of those who are trying to realize their personal legends. But they do help children, drunkards, and the elderly, too.
That made me happy because I got a shout out there.
Yeah, exactly.
It's good to know that no matter what, my drunken heart is true.
Woo! Yeah. So, maybe one last one. Again, ringing the, no, you are secretly an important man, or woman, or child, or whatever bell. The Alchemist said, no matter what he does, every person on Earth plays a central role in the history of the world, and normally he doesn't know it. The boy smiled. He had never imagined that questions about life would be of such importance to a shepherd. Whatever the fuck that means. I mean, he's a priest dropout. I think we didn't talk about that. He had studied to be a priest before, so he's not just a shepherd.
Once again, though, I'm going to refer to something I mentioned in the last segment. I feel like that is a wink and nod. To biblical terms, right? He never thought matters of philosophical importance would be so, important to a shepherd. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like so much of this is like, get it? Like, I'm just saying.
I feel you. And
I don't know if that makes it better or not, but I felt like that's what was happening there, at least.
Right. And, the sheep stuff is pretty consistent, so I'm not going to argue with that, but I'd like to leave us with one last animal-related
Okay.
quote. Sit down. We'll have something to drink and eat. Sorry. Fuck.
Just start from sit down. Give it 1 second.
Sit down. We'll have something to drink and eat these hawks, said the Alchemist.
Yuck.
God, that's metal.
Yeah, that's pretty fucking metal.
Really
the
good.
Alchemist, the real Alchemist, has hawks that he sends out into the desert, and they come back with like cobras and fucking smaller birds and shit. It's pretty brutal.
It's fucking brutal. And you get to imagine this, like, alchemist riding around with a bird of prey on his shoulder like a pirate, but desert and cooler and, like, more impressive. Surprising lack of eye patches in this book. I was disappointed in that.
That's true. In scimitars, like you mentioned earlier, a sword appears, but is not featured prominently.
Ever again. And like a couple of people like loosen swords in their scabbards. There is actually one really brutal scene where they lure a bunch of bandits into the oasis and basically all like...
They butcher them.
Slit their throats in the middle of the night. That's unexpected.
Very
in
unexpected.
A book about self-empowerment, but it happened.
Yeah, it's like sometimes this book forgets what it's trying to be and just becomes like a weird little like adventure tale. And it's at that point where I enjoyed it most.
I think that's fair, but it's if you judge it against other good adventure tales, you'll be sorely disappointed.
Anyway, I think it's time to move on to another segment. It's time for us to read parts of this book to you in what is known as dramatic readings.
Dramatic readings. We're gonna make it sound important. Dramatic readings. Yeah, I got some words for you.
All right, dramatic readings. Parts of this book read aloud. I hope you're ready. I picked out an extra special one, folks at home. This is about our hero learning to be the wind.
Oh, fuck.
As if a more obvious spiritual metaphor could not exist, here is our hero learning to be the wind. Just teach me to be the wind for a few moments, the boy said, so you and I can talk about the limitless possibilities of people and the winds. The wind's curiosity was aroused, something that had never happened before. It wanted to talk about those things, but it didn't know how to turn a man into the wind. And look at how many things the wind already knew how to do. It created deserts, sank ships, felled entire forests, and blew through cities filled with music and strange noises. It felt that it had no limits, yet here was a boy saying that there were other things the wind should be able to do. This is what we call love, the boy said, seeing that the wind was close to granting what he requested. When you are loved, you can do anything in creation. When you are loved, there's no need at all to understand what's happening because everything happens within you and even men can turn themselves into the wind. As long as the wind helps, of course. The wind was a proud being, and it was becoming irritated with what the boy was saying. It commenced to blow harder, raising the desert sands, but finally it had to recognize that, even making its way around the world, it didn't know how to turn a man into the wind, and it knew nothing about love.
Really makes you think, man.
I just wanted to say the voice that I was using there is how I read every piece of dialogue in this book in my head, which was that like this boy was like kind of like a sassy, like Bill and Ted style cartoon character. Like, actually, Mr. Alchemist, I think you'll find it's all about love. But yeah, anyway.
I'm here to teach the wind about love.
Exactly.
Night on drive time.
Yeah. Like kind of the 80s teen mixed with drive time radio host, apparently, I guess is how it sounds in my head. I don't know. This book did things to me, and it wasn't what the author wanted.
No.
So.
Hey, mister, you want to play some stickball?
Yeah.
Hey, North Wind, you don't know squat about love. I have no idea where any of this is coming from.
This is what we call love, the boy said. Anyway, when you're loved, you can do anything in creation. All right. I'm sorry. It's your turn. Dramatically read to us.
I shall dramatically read to you. This is a lengthy follow-up to a conversation between the boy and his heart. So he had a boy and heart to heart, and they had an argument and kind of made up, and then this is what happens after. The boy continued to listen to his heart as they crossed the desert. He came to understand its dodges and tricks and to accept it as it was. He lost his fear and forgot about his need to go back to the oasis because, one afternoon, his heart told him that it was happy. Even though I complain sometimes, it said, it's because I'm the heart of a person, and people's hearts are that way. People are afraid to pursue their most important dreams because they feel that they don't deserve them or they'll be unable to achieve them. We, their hearts, become fearful just thinking of loved ones who go away forever, or of moments that could have been good but weren't, or treasures that might have been found but were forever hidden in the sands. Because when these things happen, we suffer terribly. I think the heart went to like some kind of heart convention. My heart is afraid that it will have to suffer, the boy told the alchemist one night as they looked up at the moonless sky. Tell your heart that the fear of suffering is worse than the suffering itself, and that no heart has ever suffered when it goes in search of its dreams, because every second of the search is a second's encounter with God and with eternity.
Okay, a few things.
Yeah.
One, horrible passage from the book, but
Right.
yeah, people were expecting that.
Emblematic of the book.
Number two, apparently in my mind, I personified this as like an extreme 90s cartoon with dudes like, hell yeah. And you, on the other hand, have turned this into a puppet show from Mr. Rogers.
I did feel a strong puppety vibe through this.
Number three is that you should totally do voices for a children's puppet show.
That's kind of the meanest thing you've ever said to me.
No, it was great. That's a legitimate compliment.
Thank you.
There's big money in puppetry, my friend. And on that, it's time for us to go to break. We're going to come back and we will talk to you more.
A little bit.
All right, welcome back to I Don't Even Own a Television.
Oh my God! That's Centa Schumacher's music. What the hell's she doing here?
Gotta go.
Jay is running out of here like a scalded dog, and he has been replaced by this extra special guest, Centa Schumacher, who is here to talk a little bit about The Alchemist from a perspective that Jay and I do not share.
Hi, listeners. Aren't you glad that I'm here?
Well, I know we are. So, Centa, we had talked about this a little bit off the air. And Jay and I had chatted about it a little bit on the air as well. We have kind of a specific perspective on The Alchemist, but you were not super stoked when you heard that we were going to do this. Is that right?
No, I heard Jay and I were talking, and I was like, "Oh, what book are you doing next?" He's like, we're doing that really lame book, The Alchemist." And I was like, "Oh, I just read that this summer, and it had made a pretty big impact on me, and I'd really enjoyed it." But unlike, I do want to say that I am accepting that people can have different opinions versus my own. There we go. And that it's okay that people can like things or don't like things that I like. So I'm just going to preface that. But I really did enjoy that book a lot.
Which I think is fair. So can you talk a little bit about, what you enjoyed about it, what value it really had for you.
Okay, I think it was definitely one of those like right place, right time things too. I just got my MFA and then in May, and then kind of hit this crash of being like, okay, so I had all this huge push of work to get my degree, and now I'm a person with a degree and no job. And I did a lot of reading over the summer, and that book really just it made me feel really good. It was like, oh yeah, okay. It's good. I got to keep doing this. I got to keep doing my thing. Got to follow my own sense of what is good for me in my own life. And there's, and things will turn out if you do that. So it was a really, it was a reassuring moment for me. Also, he gets magic rocks. And for those of you who don't know, I have a gigantic rock collection. So I like that too.
Just as a complete side note, he does. We talked about this a tiny bit. He does get magic rocks. He literally uses them once and forgets about them for the rest of the book, and he remembers that he has them on like the next to last page or something. I
do remember that, and he was like, "I don't need these anymore." I'm like, "Well, but they're cool. Don't just get rid of them.
You could send them to me."
Yeah, I like rocks.
He does get to bond with another guy because they both have the magic rocks,
right.
And his new I think it's the Englishman who has them and recognizes them, and he's like, magic rock man, are you?
Yeah.
Wink.
Yeah, I'm like that with crystal
friends.
people. Like it's actually really interesting. Like crystal people, some people are crystal people in a science way, some people are crystal people in a metaphysical way. But either time, they'll be like, "Oh, you like crystals," and you'll each reach into your pocket or purse or whatever, and somebody has a crystal. I'm wearing a crystal at this moment. I love them. Rocks are great.
Right on. So, for you, it was very much like, hey, this is something that is helpful for me to be told right now because, like Lord knows the rest of the world isn't necessarily telling me this or...
Right. And I think, I know Jay and I had talked about this earlier this morning. It was like, if you haven't been in an environment where you've been told your whole life, like what you're doing is right and good and you should go for what you want, then it's kind of nice to get reminders every once in a while. It's not like I grew up in a place where I was, completely discouraged to be myself, but I was. I mean, I grew up in a tiny town, and I'm a farmer's daughter, and being an artist wasn't exactly what anyone had in mind for me. So, it's nice to read a thing and be like, oh yeah, I can, if I frame this, my life goal in this kind of epic way, sometimes it's kind of nice and helps me keep going with things.
Interesting. And I would imagine that, we've talked about this a little bit before as well. You come from a really big family. And one of the things that really rang frustratingly and falsely to me was how sort of individualistic all the advice was. There are a couple of women that the protagonist encounters over the course of his journey who are like explicitly positioned as props in his journey and for his narrative.
Sorry, Fatima.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, Fatima. But for an only child like me, that might sound a little perverse because I've had to work a little harder to sort of seek out connection. I moved around a bunch, right? So maybe the element sounds a little bit better to somebody who's like, no, I'm actually from a place with a big family, and being told actually traveling and like walking away from people, maybe that is a helpful message.
Absolutely. I'm the middle child of 5, and I'm the one, like, I live the farthest away from all of my family. Like, I don't know, we are a very tight family unit, and I think there was a lot of struggle for all of us to become individuals outside of that. So having that and being like, yeah, individuality and who you are is important, I think was it's probably something that's kind of unconscious, that it's interesting that you point out, like, I don't often make that connection of like the fact that I had to kind of claw my way out of this really intense family unit. But that is what it is.
Interesting. So is there anything else, defense you want to mount or good thing you want to drill down on The Alchemist? Because, Jay and I we've had a lot of fun here today. And I'm not going to lie, it got a little blue.
I look forward to hearing the rest of the episode. I liked how how simple the prose was as well. I don't know, because it was dealing with such heady things, sometimes things can get kind of, I don't know, overwrought. And I'm although I did overhear you guys doing the dramatic readings, so maybe that is my opinion and not everyone's. But so I just remember it being like, kind of like, and then there was a desert, and the desert was really big, and then we moved through it, and that was it. But sometimes if that's done the right way, you can fill in with your own imagination what that is, and then if it's done the wrong way, simple prose can be just really boring. But I think that for me at least, I had a really like vivid image of what was happening, even if the description was really simple.
You definitely can't say that the prose got in the way.
Right.
We touched on that earlier. I mean, and that happens with so much of what we read and so much of what we've talked about. So that's definitely a good point. Well, thank you so much for coming back and giving a valuable perspective that Jay and I definitely didn't have.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks for letting me run in.
Yeah, thanks for running in and leaving Jay lying on the ground unconscious. I think he's stirring
put him
now.
Through the press table.
Yeah, exactly. You put him through the Mexican announcer's table. It's time for you to grab his belt and run away with it.
That was awesome. It was cool to get an alternate opinion from someone who isn't a jaded male asshole.
Absolutely. And I think just the details that are about really why and how and what about this can be really valuable and a good read.
Yeah. Okay, so let's do some recommendations here.
I'm into it.
Why don't you go first?
Okay. So I know I've recommended this author before, and I suspect strongly I've recommended this book before, but, hey, life goes on. You probably haven't read it. And that book is by Rebecca Solnit, and the book is called Wanderlust. It is a natural history of walking, which sounds incredibly dull, but is in fact incredibly interesting. It turns out that in a very real way, being able to walk is as much a thing that differentiates humans from other apes as being able to talk does. And it is super fascinating and connected to this because this is, not unlike The Hobbit, a book about a guy who goes for a really long walk.
Good point.
Wanderlust, Rebecca Solnit. Read it, love it, send me emails about it. We will chat.
I will say, exercising my razor-sharp powers of memory, while you have recommended Solnit on the show before, you have not recommended this book.
Awesome.
So, I believe Men Explain Things to Me was the one you recommended previously. So.
Maybe so, and I know I recommended, I'm spacing the name, but kind of a white Zen book she wrote.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Anyway,
okay.
Read Rebecca Solnit.
She's great. I'm going to stick a little closer to the theme, I guess, maybe a little too on the nose, but I'm just going to say if you want to read something that's framed as a parable that has philosophical undertones that, works on the concept of both like for children and adults and people who kind of want to explore these themes in, the themes of the intentionality of the universe and stuff like that, but say maybe in a little less preachy way. I'm going to massacre this name, by the way. My parents and my grandparents speak French. I do not. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, The Little Prince. Yeah, so check that out. Everybody's read this. You may have not read it since you were a kid. You should go back and read it again. I find it to be a really good little parable that's about kind of the same things in this book, but maybe I felt less heavy-handed. So
I have not read it.
Well, yeah. I should
read it.
Also, there's really cool illustrations about a snake that eats an elephant, and then it looks like a hat. I'm just saying. Cool shit. Yeah.
I've seen the illustrations mostly in tattoo form.
There's a really cool pop-up book of it. Yeah. It's a book with a legend, but
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess on to...
Actually, I want to recommend one more thing.
All right.
Extra special bonus recommendation. If you want to know a little something about actual alchemy, I recommend the song Workshop of the Telescopes by Blue Öyster Cult. And I'm doing this 98% so I can put it in the show notes. Listen to it, email me about it, we'll chat.
I like Blue Öyster Cult a lot.
I am literally wearing a Blue Öyster Cult shirt.
And if you'd like to listen to something by The Alchemist, may I recommend the discography of Dilated Peoples, Southern California's premier intellectual hip-hop act from the years of maybe 1998 till 2004? I don't know.
We're just going to get back into traffic on the twos.
Yeah. Okay, anyway, letters.
Yeah, let's do some letters.
A, letter B, letter C, letter D, letter E, letter F, letter G, letter. Got a lot of letters.
Okay, first off, thanks to everybody who wrote in to express their belief in Smersh.
Yes.
Because they read something on Wikipedia about it. Wake up, sheeple. Anybody can edit Wikipedia.
We fooled you all.
Yeah, it is the official belief of IDEO TV Pod that there is no such thing as Smersh. You will never convince us otherwise. Period. Okay, so let's go into some actual letters that we'll read. This one came from Sean No Last Name, and it goes a little something like this. Ahoy from Brno.
Ahoy hoy.
I just met up with my friend for a beer who told me he finally relented and checked out IDEO TV.
Well, hold on. We don't approve of such things here at I Don't Even Own a Television. We are pro-temperance. Do not destroy your mind in the dangerous world of alcohol dens.
That's true. Keep a PMA, but we do wildly approve of abusing your friends until they listen to our podcast.
Yes, that much we're down with.
Yeah. Two things stick out to me. One, this has now likely made you the most popular bad movie podcast with Scottish people based in the Czech Republic.
Bad movie?
Yes!
Is that what we're doing now?
Did I say bad movie?
You sure did.
Sorry, he wrote bad book. I said bad movie. I don't know why. Sorry.
So the whole point of this letter was for me to make fun of you for misspeaking slightly, right? That makes for great audio.
Son of a bitch.
No, thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah,
and
that is so cool.
we're proud.
Yeah. First that, next the world. Two, we discussed how The Alchemist is a great book for IDEO TV.
Oh, hey.
What? Pretty short, very up its own arse, and popular with pseudo-intellectuals. Yeesh. The added wrinkle is we both felt awful about suggesting it, since people close to each of us, my girlfriend, his brother, had non-ironically recommended it as a must-read, and we had to sort of go along with it. Anyway, whatever book you choose to cover will be undoubtedly awful, still waiting for Snow Crash, so I'm looking forward to the next episode. Take care. Follow up a little while later. Note, my girlfriend is not his brother. I am just extremely clumsy with English. Maybe I should write a book.
First of all, I did not have the impression that his girlfriend was his brother. So your English is better than you think, bud. Number two, I hope that you enjoyed the episode for sure. Like I said earlier, this is an oft-requested tome.
Definitely.
And I feel like it has less to do with the content of it and just more the forcefulness of how frequently this gets recommended to a certain type of person. Mm-hmm. I feel like if you're in your mid-20s and you're artistic, there's going to be someone in your life who's going to tell you, like, you should read this, you know?
Right.
And, like, some people that's great. Some people it just becomes very annoying really fast. So, yeah. Agreed.
Excellent. So the second email I'd like to read is from Eric, no last name, and it goes a little something like this. Hey. Hello. I started listening to your podcast a week ago and can't stop. Y'all are hilarious. Keep up the good work. I had one problem, though. I thought it was silly that you kept reintroducing yourselves at the beginning after each break.
That was silly.
Every time you did, I shook my head and thought, we all know who you are.
We atone.
Why bother doing this? Then, while I was listening to it, my roommate came in and asked what I was listening to. As I opened my mouth to speak, you came back from break and explained who you are and what you're doing. I don't think I've ever been proven wrong so elegantly.
Well,
so there's a little pod controversy.
A podtroversy?
Podtroversy, yeah.
Fear not. From now on, every 2 minutes, we're going to remind you what you're listening to, but we're not going to talk. It's going to be like when you listen to like a Trapaholics mixtape and there's some like fucking air horns and it comes in and it's like, damn, son, where you find this? We're going to do that, but it'll be like a podcast about bad books. About every 2 minutes. So we'll put that in right here.
You are now listening to I Don't Even Own a Television.
A podcast about
Bad books.
All right.
Hope you liked it and get used to it. We'll also put that up on the site in the show notes as your new ringtone.
Wait.
You are now listening to I Don't Even Own a Television.
a podcast about
Bad books.
All right, there it was again. Awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the last letter I want to read. This is from Ryan, no last name. Yo, I'm that guy you mailed ripped out pages of that one book to. I can't remember the name. Moonshadow? Shadow Moon, I think.
Shadow Moon.
Shadow Moon.
That's it.
I do want to note this was by request.
Yes.
I'm not out here just randomly mailing.
Be careful.
ripped out
If you join our Facebook group, we're going to Google your name, find your address, and mail you pages torn out of a book.
Anyway, wanted to say thanks for the response. Never been able to engage with a podcaster directly like that, and it was great to be reminded that my free entertainment was made by real-life humans. We are definitely real-life humans. We are not any kind of robots, beep boop, or aliens sent here to study your ways through the medium of terrible books.
If I was an alien, I'd say and like a lot less.
Definitely true. As I write this, I'm listening to your condominium episode, and I just thought I'd write in. I'm a security guard, and your podcasts keep me entertained at least once a week while I sit here on the graveyard shift and do nothing but occasionally explain the concept of an appointment to truck drivers. Anyway, keep up the good work, and thanks again for responding to my dumb bullshit. And thank you so much. We love doing it. And I absolutely had to read this because of the subject line, which is, major thankage for the swag, bro dooders.
Being a bro dooder has long been a goal of mine, and it's awesome to finally enter that echelon.
Exactly. I think it's safe to say if you want your letter read here on IDEO TV Pod, a subject line like, major thanks for the swag, bro dooders is the way to do it.
Okay, so I wanted to read one thing. This is not a letter to us, but this is something I discovered earlier today. Someone posted on our Facebook group, the I Don't Even Own a Television Party Pit, where you can go and talk about books with other smart people. It's pretty cool. All these conversations keep happening, and we aren't even starting them. It's pretty rad.
Sometimes we're not even taking part in them. We're usually paying attention to them, and they're awesome. But yeah, it's really great.
I have to keep reminding myself not to comment on everything. It's important to maintain a mystique.
Yeah.
But yeah, so someone posted a photo of Wild Animus in their local bookstore. And it turned out that they're in a small town in Ireland. And I was like, oh, how the fuck did Wild Animus reach these goals? So as I do about once a week, I Googled Wild Animus. And I found a blog post about Wild Animus, which wasn't super interesting. But what was interesting was this comment that I want to read. And if you're not already a listener of the podcast for a long time, I suggest you go back and check out Wild Animus so you know what we're talking about.
Yeah, for any new listeners, Wild Animus is a shockingly insane book, rather similar to this one, at least in its goals, but kind of perfect example of the weed dad genre we occasionally talk about, and basically involves a guy who, for philosophical reasons, dresses up like a ram and goes to live and get hunted by the wolves. That's not a joke. That's a description of the book.
It's notable because of its kind of ubiquity.
Right.
And the reason why is the man who wrote it is a super rich venture capitalist who had a spiritual epiphany and put lots and lots of money into getting his book out there for people. So,
and how much money did he spend, and how much infrastructure did he build to get his book out there, Jay?
A lot.
A lot. Perhaps a story you're about to tell will illustrate
this.
It's
true. And yeah, so definitely check out that episode if you haven't. Wild Animus is kind of legendary amongst us and our listeners because of its fucking weirdness. And so on an article about Wild Animus, there was this comment. I forgot how many thousands of copies were distributed, but I can never forget how awesome it was when I was doing it. So
what?
This is a comment from someone who was hired by Rich Shapiro to distribute his book. The budget for this must have been insane because Shapiro had teams distributing the book across the U.S. and the expenses included transportation, hotels, meals, and even drinks.
I have never had a job that good.
I was part of a team that went through the New York tri-state area, which included Princeton, Yale, Cornell, and Columbia, and I even remember hitting Times Square and a gazillion other places in the space of 2 months. The distribution team was accompanied by a group of actors who would reenact portions of the book, and on some days would pretend they were boycotting the book.
I want to note, these are actors enacting portions of a book about a guy who dresses up like a ram and goes to live with the rams to get hunted by wolves.
Yes. We even got huge bonuses for distributing a certain amount of copies, and at the end of the project, many people were flown to San Francisco for a party at Shapiro's expense, too. To this day, I still have no idea what the hell all of that was about. The book is horrible beyond belief, but I swear it was the best summer job ever.
Oh my God. That is remarkable and helps explain something that is literally true. And we've talked about this before. Your local thrift store has a copy of Wild Animus. Once your eyes are opened to look for this, you will never not see it.
I hate to use the term because lately it's become really associated with some ugly stuff, but it is kind of a red pill moment. Mm-hmm. And that, like, yeah. You know, like when people explain to you that between the E and the X and FedEx is actually an arrow pointing to the right.
Right.
And then every time you look at that logo, you see it every time. See. This is going to be like this for you with thrift stores and used bookshops. Just glance at W. You're going to see like at least 2 copies of Wild Animus, and there are many different jackets.
Yeah. So let's also introduce you to a little thing we like to call the Curse of the Ram's Phallus. When you see this book, friends, buy it and hide it at your friend's house somewhere.
Yeah.
Spread the joy so that eventually they come to you and say, have you heard of this fucking thing called Wild Animus?
It's not going to cost you more than $1.
Exactly.
Tops. The money's not going to go back to Homeboy at this point, so you don't have to worry about what you're supporting. And you can perpetuate a massive ruse on the galaxy at large by putting this book in weird places. So load up on Wild Animus, put it under the floor mats of your friend's car, stay in an Airbnb, leave it in the Airbnb.
Yep.
Maybe like bury it in a geocache and send out cryptic clues online.
Yeah.
There are so many things you can do.
But at the very least, if you do nothing else, buy the next copy you see, put it under the toilet in your friend's house, and wait for them to complain about it.
Yeah. Dude, there was this weird book about rams fucking in my bathroom all of a sudden. Anyway, if you like the show, why not get in touch with us? I don't even own a television at gmail.com. You can email us. We're on Twitter and Facebook at IDEOTVPod. Yeah, we love hearing from you, obviously. Write in. Maybe we'll read your stuff. Online, I mean, on the air, either way, we're going to read it and internalize it and act on it and make it into action through the intentionality of the universe.
Become part of our personal journey.
That's true. Our personal legend, TM.
Sorry, our personal legend. Yes.
Yes. So, thank you so much. I don't even own a television. We love you.
Woo!
Hey, D-Train, you want to make a song?
Yeah, I don't really care.
Alright, well, let's just kick it from our heads, alright?
Yeah, I'll just freestyle.
Alright, here we go. I like this beat. Yo, Campbell, you like this beat?
Yeah, fool, you better.
Alright, D-Train, you ready? You got the headphones in?
Oh, yeah.
Alright, kick it.
Mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2. It's Santiago, bitch, I'm gonna tell you what I do. I grew up on the south side of Wanderlust, making money off my sheep I thought was my future. Until one day I had that dream.
What? You had a dream?
So the king don't lie, he said it's the treasure, and if I find it, it'll make me better. My personal legend is what I'm meant to do, to go across the globe and find myself too. My treasure chest might be tough to find, but you know it ain't ever gonna leave my mind. Then one day I left the shop with my money in the bank I was sure to rob. My personal legend was laying right before me. As I started on my way, I was robbed the first day. They don't know who they were messing with. I'm the king of the sheep, but I ran off scared. I don't want to mess with those robbers again. But I made some more money and was back on track. Hit me up, Miles, I know you got my back.
I gotta do this on my own. I interpreted my dreams to fulfill my legend, and I'm never gonna sleep. So you bitch, I say this, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna find my treasure, ain't giving none to you. Personal legend,
but personal.
Personal legend,
but personal.
Personal legend,
but personal.
Gotta get up to heaven.